We're about to demonstrate the process for making a wire or chain rosary. We presently have two tools, one without a spring and one with a spring. The rosary plier is set up to be able to perform the function without laying the tool down. However, you would need a cutter and a pair of round nose pliers as an alternative to this tool, but there are rosary pliers which will accomplish both tasks. The first task to be demonstrated will be beading. To bead, you place the wire flush into the nose of the plier. With the wire flush against the nose of the pliers, you twist it completely around until it is touching. You bring the pliers back to the beginning point and you bend backwards, and you're forming your first eye. You close the eye. You bring your bead up to the eye, and perpendicular, for purposes of preventing kinking, perpendicular, you're going to make your next loop by twisting the wire like that, and you're going to cut in there. These rosary pliers allow you to cut in there without issue. At this point, you'll have something that looks similar to that. You'll put your pliers and you'll bend that back fairly significantly, almost to a right angle. With the nose of the pliers, you'll grab the end of that loop you're making here and you'll roll that forward with a little back pressure at the same time. You'll make most of the turn, move back into the loop a little, and complete your loop in the pliers. You'll have your second eye. You proceed by making your next loop. Add your first bead, close the loop. Your second bead, perpendicular. Bend back, grab at the end, roll forward, complete your eye. On this third bead I'm demonstrating at the beginning of the rosary, I'll show you an alternative technique for making the second eye, which I find useful on glass beads or something that might create an issue with the pliers up against it using that technique. And this would be similar to if you were using eye pins. You would bend the wire or the eye pin at a right angle. You would gauge the amount of wire you need and you would cut there. As with an eye pin, you'd have something that looks like that. Placing your noses on the end of the wire, you would roll that in and complete your loop in a similar fashion. That is simply helpful when you're putting the pliers against the edge of the glass bead or something of that nature. This is perfectly fine for beading with plastic beads to do that though. The next step in making a wire rosary is chain. Chain is made in a similar fashion to the bead, to the beading, by holding the wire the same manner as you're beading and making the same twist. However, you do not bend backwards. Your second loop to make a link of chain, simply for demonstration, is done by laying your pliers across that first loop and making it in this fashion. Then you have the chair that would be demonstrated in the written instructions, basically 2 links at a right angle. That would be applied to work by making your first loop, adding your beads, closing the loop, and then finishing your link. You cut inside that second loop and you close it up against the first part of the loop. You continue by making 3 links, or the number of links you prefer. If that would be 4 or 5, that's entirely fine too. Those links are added to your work. At this point, you will have beads and 3 links of chain, at which point you would either be adding an Our Father bead at the beginning or out in the midst of making your rosary. That is done by going back to your beading loop, add your bead, then you would be adding chain to the point of your next decade, your crucifix, or your centerpiece. In this case, we'll be demonstrating our continuation to the crucifix. At the end of the rosary. As a beginner, most of these methods can be worked on by exaggerating the size of your work to get a feel for what you're doing before carrying on and refining the skill to a more precise piece of work. So at this point we have 3 beads leading into our first Our Father bead and 3 links of chain leading into where we will attach our crucifix. The crucifix and centerpiece are attached by making bows. And the bow is made by a slight bend in the wire, approximately 45 degrees, and forming a loop at the bend. The loop comes around to a right angle with the first straight piece. Bringing the points of the pliers up against the small straight piece, you sharply bend the wire back against the pliers. That is the first part of your bow. The second part of your bow is made by placing your pliers and repeating the process on the other end. A slight bend, approximately 45 degrees, and then forming a circle on the other side of the bow. At this point, your bow would be set up in a manner such as this and be completed by catching the end of the first straight piece of wire and rolling the wire around. At this point, you would cut your wire there and be able to bend the last piece of wire out of the way so as it would not catch on anything or be felt. That is a completed bow. A bow where we attach the crucifix the one side of the bow can be smaller than the other side for attaching to the wire or the chain. And the other side of the bow should be made as large as necessary to attach your crucifix or centerpiece. With your bow set up, you'd add your crucifix or centerpiece. You catch the end of that wire. And you would roll in succession. I generally like to make these at least 3 or 4 wraps, sometimes 5. Again, you choose a place like that. We're easily able to catch the end of the wire and have a place where you can roll it down. And there you have the 3 steps for making a wire or chain rosary: the beading, the chain, and the bow. These are the processes you would repeat out in the process of making a rosary. In making the chain, you need to hide or push away the points of the links that you'd be able to see by laying the chain across your finger, and you catch that link of chain. You catch that tip of that chain and you push it out of the way, will give you your completed look for chain rosaries. And you'd repeat that process by observing the chain in the opposite direction. As is the case, sometimes one side of the link is more prominent than others, and sometimes the closing of the first link, the first side gets the other side out of the way. And that completes the process of making the chain.